So today we're going to unravel the story of a man named Zachary Kalashov, a guy who climbed to the very top of the Russian criminal underworld only to lose everything, and I mean everything, in a single night.
Forever young, thief-in-law #1. That was his whole reputation. He was known as Shakro Molodoy, which means Shakro the Young. Kinda ironic, right? Especially for a name that would define a career spanning half a century, right at the peak of organized crime.
So, you gotta ask yourself, how does a guy like this, a man who dodged 10 assassination attempts and ran a global criminal network, how does he lose it all? Over one single, chaotic street fight? It sounds impossible, right? Well, to figure out the fall, we've actually got to start at the very end. So let's jump right in. This is the moment the legend, the myth of his invincibility was just completely shattered. Okay, picture this. It's 2016. An elite special forces team is storming this ridiculously lavish mansion just outside Moscow. And inside, who do they find? Their target, Zachary Kalashov. But he's not fighting, he's not running, he's just sitting there, calmly, already in handcuffs. He's defiant, maybe even a little bored, like this is all just a big waste of his time. But man, he couldn't have been more wrong. This time, everything was different.
So, how in the world did he get to this point? To really get it, we need to rewind. Let's go all the way back to the beginning and see how a young man from Georgia became the infamous Shakro the Young.
All right, before we go any further, there's a really important term you need to know. Vor v zakone. Literally, it means thief in law. Now, this isn't just your average gangster or mob boss. No. This is the absolute highest rank you can get in the Russian criminal hierarchy. Think of them as part Supreme Court judge, part CEO for a massive, and I mean violent, criminal empire. This was the world Shakro lived in.
And his rise, it was absolutely meteoric. He came from Georgia's Yazidi minority, and by the time he was just 20, he'd already racked up a bunch of convictions. But his big break, his real entry into the big leagues, came when the godfather of the entire Russian criminal world, a guy named Ded Kasan, personally crowned him a thief-in-law. From that moment on, Shakro basically became the face of this new, incredibly ruthless generation of gangsters who just thrived in the chaos of 1990s Russia. And how did he secure that power? With pure, unadulterated brutality. He launched this bloody war against a rival gang, and in the process, he built this legendary reputation for being, well, unkillable. We're talking 10 separate assassination attempts. 10! Including one, you're not gonna believe this, where hitmen tried to get him from a fake ambulance. And every time he survived, his legend just grew bigger. So, okay, he's basically conquered the streets of Moscow. What's next? For Shakro, his sights were set on something much bigger, a full-blown international empire. And he decided to set up his headquarters in a pretty surprising place. Now, the entire foundation of his massive wealth was built on one simple concept, krysha. It literally translates to roof. Back in the 90s, every single business needed a roof, basically a criminal group you paid for protection from other gangs. But see, with Shakro, it was different. He didn't just offer protection, he was the storm everyone else needed protection from. And his methods for, let's call it corporate acquisition, were brutally effective. And this casino takeover, it's a perfect example of how he operated. This wasn't just random violence. It was a cold, calculated, 5-step corporate takeover. First, his crew makes demands on Moscow's 2 biggest casinos. When that doesn't work, step 2, the owner's lawyer just vanishes, along with all the company's legal documents. Then, they lure the owner, an American guy named Alex Crane, to a fake meeting. Step 4, they kidnap him. They get $1 million ransom, and then they murder him anyway. And boom, step 5, Shakro's empire now controls 2 of the biggest cash fire hoses in the entire city. Just like that. So what do you even do with that much cash pouring in? You build something called an obshok. It's like a massive criminal slush fund, and the numbers we're talking about here are just mind-boggling. According to some reports, the European fund that Shakro and his buddies controlled was allegedly worth, get this, $1 trillion. Yeah, you heard me right, $1 trillion. Just let that sink in for a second. Okay, so where do you park $1 trillion? For Shakro and his crew, the answer was Spain's Costa del Sol. And this wasn't a vacation choice, it was pure strategy. Why Spain? Well, for one, their anti-money laundering laws were super weak, so it was easy to just pour illicit cash into real estate. Plus, it was a quick flight back to Moscow to handle business. And maybe most importantly, it was a safe zone.
All the rival gangs had a truce there, no shootouts, it was strictly business. But, the good times couldn't last forever. In 2005, a huge Spanish police operation, we're talking massive, completely dismantled their network. Shakro actually managed to escape at first, but they nabbed him a year later in Dubai and sent him back to Spain. He ended up spending nearly 8 years in a Spanish prison. Now, for almost any other crime boss, that would be it, game over. But not for Shakro the Young. For him, prison was just an intermission. His return to Russia would set the stage for his greatest triumph, and, ironically, his ultimate fatal mistake. See, when he was finally deported back to Russia in 2014, he didn't come back as some washed-up ex-con. He returned as an absolute king. While he was locked up, his old mentor, Ded Kasan, had been assassinated, and by the unwritten laws of their world, Shakro inherited the entire criminal throne. He was now officially thief-in-law number 1. And after all that, surviving prison, surviving assassins, inheriting a criminal empire, it all came crashing down over a stupidly petty dispute at some trendy Moscow restaurant. It's almost unbelievable. On one side, you've got Shakro's crew, led by his top enforcer, a guy they called the Italian, who were there to shake down the owner. And on the other side, the restaurant owner's defense, led by this tough-as-nails lawyer and ex-FSB agent named Edward Budantsev. The stage was set for a showdown that would change everything. And this is exactly how it all spiraled out of control. First, the Italian's crew shows up, starts making threats. A little while later, the police arrive, but they do absolutely nothing. In fact, it looked like they were consulting with the gangsters. It's insane. Then, the lawyer, Budantsev, arrives. The shouting match spills out onto the street, it turns into a brawl, and Budantsev, who's getting beaten by a whole group of guys, pulls out a gun and just opens fire. The result was an absolute catastrophe for the king of the underworld. 2 of Shakro's guys were dead, 8 more were wounded, and in a legal twist that nobody saw coming, the shooter, Budantsev, was acquitted. He successfully claimed self-defense. Think about that. The invincible crime boss's crew just lost a public street fight, and the guy who shot them walked away a free man. It was an unheard of public humiliation. That one single disastrous shootout, it unraveled everything. It exposed a weakness, a chink in the armor that law enforcement could finally exploit. Even during his final arrest, Shakro was as defiant as ever. You can see it in his own words. He tells the officers, "I will not say anything in front of the camera. Take the camera away and we'll talk." He still thought he was in control. He still believed he could just negotiate his way out of it, just like he always had. But not this time. He couldn't. That shootout gave prosecutors the one thing they'd never had before, a direct, undeniable link from an extortion attempt straight to the top guy, straight to him. And in 2018, the untouchable thief-in-law number 1 was sentenced to nearly 10 years in a strict regime prison colony. The reign was over. And so, today, Shakro's empire is in absolute disarray. The king himself is imprisoned, though they say he's still treated like a demigod inside. His chosen heir, a guy known as Shishkin, is also under investigation. His top lieutenants? They're being hunted down in other countries and extradited one by one. For law enforcement, the game has totally changed. Now, their main goal is just to stop the inevitable power vacuum from exploding into a brand new, bloody gang war. And that leaves us with one final, kind of chilling question. When a throne this powerful, this rich, suddenly sits empty, it's almost never for long. So, is the era of the all-powerful thief-in-law really over? Or is the entire Russian underworld just holding its breath, waiting for the next bloody war for the crown to begin?